Hello, welcome back to my haunted library. It's Regina. So, this week I'm focusing on carnival horror. Carnival horror is a subgenre of horror in films like, I don't know, right off the top of my head, Funhouse, and I think that's based on the book by Dean Koontz, which I have read. Of course, one of the most famous, I don't know if you would really consider it carnival horror, but it would definitely fit into the creepy clown genre, would be It, with our infamous Pennywise. So this has been an area that has been explored many times, and I think it's a gift that keeps on giving because I happen to love that genre wherever it appears. So this week I'm going to be talking about a couple different versions of that, and I will timestamp everything below because my videos lately have run a little long and kind of cover different topics. But first, I wanted to start with a little mini haul that I did this past weekend. I went to Burlington, New Jersey. So there is a nice bookstore in Burlington that's a very small secondhand bookstore, and the owner has a lot of cool records and kind of pulp fiction. And I was able to dig a few books from that stack. So here we go. What did I find? I was happy that I found a few Gothic romances. This one's called Castle Midnight by Evelyn McKenna. Cool cover. I started reading this, almost finished. It's really short, and it's kind of a haunted castle story. Not a lot of romance, more just like a haunted story. This one's called Heiress of Bayou Vaki. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. Harriet Stone. We've got your typical cover that I love. I rarely find these like in the wild, so I was happy to stumble across them. All right, next one, Window on the Seine by Frances Y. McHugh. Again, pretty typical cover. This is what I love about like the short works, is you can knock them out in a day or two, and it's a satisfying read. Speaking of knocking out in a day or two, I also picked up this book, Cirque du Freak, A Living Nightmare by Darren and Shan. This is part of a middle grade horror series, a vampire series that I did look into a little bit. I had never read these, but I'm pretty sure I had heard of the film The Vampire Apprentice, which is based on these books. I just started reading this out of curiosity, and boy, I zipped through this book in 2 sittings and loved it. I plan on getting the rest of the series. What I really loved about this book is the characters of the kids. Darren, it's kind of like his autobiographical voice. So I'm guessing this kid is probably like 12 years old. He seemed a lot younger than a teenager, and maybe even 11. And he has a best friend named Steve, and they sneak into this midnight freak show that's in town. They find a flyer, and it's almost like Willy Wonka. They have to get the golden ticket to get inside. So there's a lot of buildup. And when they get into the freak show, there's all kinds of bizarre things that go on. There's this deadly tarantula, there's a snake boy, a bearded lady. The MC turns out to be a vampire. And Darren, the main kid, goes and steals the tarantula. It bites his friend Steve and almost kills him. And while Steve's in a coma, Darren has to make a pact with the vampire to become his apprentice. And that's kind of where it leaves off. I just gave away the whole story, but I want to keep reading and find out what happened. I love the voice in this story, the way that these kids talk to each other. It's really funny how deadly serious they are. I'm just going to go make a deal with that vampire, and I'm making sure my parents don't know. I'm going to sneak out, just the way you are when you're a kid. And that's before the horror of puberty sets in, and then everything changes and everything sucks. But right before you're there, it's a great time to be a kid. It's a great time to be a girl. It's a great time to be a boy. It's a great time just to live, and you wish it could last forever. I felt like this book really captured that for me, and I loved it. So I'm going to keep reading this. Let me know in the comments below if you know this series, and tell me what you think. And then I also found Baal, I guess that's how it's pronounced. Doesn't that mean some kind of devil or demon? By Robert McCammon. Robert R. McCammon. This looks like a nice copy. I read another one of his books, but it's escaping me which one it is. But I have several of his books. I've never read, what is the one? Swan Song, I think, is the pretty well-known one. I didn't mention, I did finish Sacrament. Isn't he cute? By Clive Barker. This was a buddy read with Andrew over at Grumpy Andrew's Horror House. I don't know if he finished it yet. I need to touch base with him and see where he is with that book. It's no rush, but I finished it and I did enjoy it. It wasn't anything to do with carnival horror, but it did have to do with kids in some part in a very disturbing way. But it was an interesting book. Okay, so moving on, I got a couple pieces of mail to look at. This is from my dear friend Priscilla. It's a nice little birthday card that she sent me because I did mention that my birthday is coming up. In fact, if you want to tune in to, I'm not going to do it on YouTube because I don't really know how to pull that off, but I'm throwing myself a big birthday party on August 28th, Saturday night, at my library in my whole studio, which you'll get a chance to see, because what I'm going to do throughout the night, and God knows what will happen, I'm going to be doing some lives on Instagram, so you can follow me there. So just to mark your calendar. If you want to come visit and be part of the party, you're invited. So thank you, Priscilla. I always appreciate your comments and your lovely cards. And it's just, she's a lovely, lovely lady. And then I also received from Frightmark some bookmarks. All right, so this is just some bookmarks, some complimentary bookmarks from Frightmark. Concerns of a single parent. Okay, well, maybe I'll give that one to Batilda to deal with her problems with her little alien child. And bridegroom etiquette. Okay, so obviously these are samples, and they have some spooky ones as well, so thank you. So carnival horror. Well, first of all, I wanted to mention that I am actually writing a book with a creepy clown carnival horror theme, and it's called Carney. And here's the cover. The cover artist is J.M. Bethencourt, and I love the style. I'm going in a little bit of a different direction, and this book is something I'm currently writing. So I don't know when the release date will be. I'm guessing probably sometime in the next year, early next year, hopefully. I'm about 20,000 words in, so I've got a long way to go, and I'm really enjoying the process so far. So I have been interested in carnival horror. I've been watching movies and reading books in the genre, just kind of get myself in the mood and looking at old images and kind of starting to collect images as like a mood board kind of thing. I don't use Pinterest, just really kind of just in a file. It's how it works best for me. Look, when I'm writing a book, the less time I can spend online, the better, if you understand what I'm talking about. So anyway, my story, it's called Carney, and it takes place in a real location that is an island between Bristol, where I live, and Burlington. Well, it's actually closer to Burlington, and it's called Burlington Island. It's owned by the state of New Jersey. It's uninhabited and has been for many years, many decades in fact, but it used to be an old amusement park called Island Beach back in the turn of the century, going into like the 1920s. And if you look at the old photographs, it was quite popular. I wrote a blog post last weekend where I talked about kind of the process of writing this novel and the research I've been doing. So I will link that below. I used to blog quite often, and then when I started my YouTube channel, I neglected it, but now I'm blogging once a week. So I'm going to list that below. It's rstclair.com. I post probably 500 word or maybe a little more blog every weekend. I try to get into that discipline. And the last one was about my novel and just kind of doing the research about Burlington Island. So Burlington Island had a fire. So I'm using that fire as a springboard for my horror story, but everything else is fictional. Some of the locations are not fictional that are in my book. If you've read any of my books, you know that I love flawed protagonists and flawed characters. My protagonist is named Dag Alton. He is a 40-ish, kind of middle-aged journalist who is very successful, but very cocky and a bit of a dick, if I can use that word. And his life falls apart when an ex-girlfriend Me Too's him. I don't know if I can use that as a verb, but I think you know what I mean. She posts something on Twitter about how abusive he was and horrible, and he gets canceled overnight. He goes into like a complete meltdown. He ends up living with his parents again in his 40s, early 40s in South Jersey. But his parents are really indulgent of their only child. And he starts doing like a paper route, and he starts to try to get himself back on his feet after this and starts a blog about this old carnival in Burlington Island. There's a series of murders going on, so there's some mystery. He meets a young woman named Aurora on Facebook who is obsessed with not only the old carnival, but the mascot named Carney. So that's kind of where my story is so far. So, like I said, check out my blog. I'm going to try to write more about the process of writing, which I don't do. And maybe I'll do a separate video on that. Another part of my looking at carnival horror is I watched a really good movie called Carnival of Souls. This movie came out in 1962. It was an American independent horror film produced and directed by Kirk Harvey, who also stars in it as this really creepy ghost kind of character, and written by John Clifford, from a story by Clifford and Harvey and starring Candice Hilligos, who I've never seen in any other movie before. And I have to highly recommend this movie to any horror fan, any film fan. I had never seen this film before, although I had heard of it. It's obvious that it was highly influential film on Night of the Living Dead. As soon as you watch it, you'll see it. But it's so good and very scary. And it's the creepiness of this movie has stayed with me. It's very low budget. In fact, I was watching it with my husband, Joe, and he was like, I said, we started watching it. I'm like, just to warn you, this is a B movie. And we watched the first scene and he's like, I think you mean this is like an F movie. And I was like, yeah, it has that rough quality, but don't let that discourage you. And it's black and white. And the sound could be better. I watched it for free on YouTube, so that might have had something to do with the quality issues, because I know that Criterion Collection released it as a DVD, and just that because it has the stamp of the Criterion Collection, that is saying, whether you believe it or not, or want to take their word for it, they've given it the stamp of approval as a work of cinematic art, and I highly concur. It's amazing. Especially for like a low budget film. Like, I'm a filmmaker, I appreciate seeing what a filmmaker does with very little money, but a lot of creativity and artistry. This movie has it all. So it starts out with these three young women, in the front seat of this car, and this group of guys come up and say, hey, you want to drag? And the main character, she is a really beautiful blonde actress, very delicate, very fragile. The whole time there's like a ghostly quality about her, which I found very interesting in the film. It's not even clear like why she's in the car. You assume, well, these are her girlfriends or whatever, and they're out just joyriding, but none of it is explained. But so the two cars race and they go over a bridge, and the car with the girls in it goes over the side of the bridge, and the car sinks, and presumably the girls drown. And then all these people show up to like pull the car out, the sheriff's there. It's a really small town, and I think it's like Kansas or something. It has a really small town feel to it. They're trying to drag the creek for the car, and she crawls out onto the bank, and she's kind of like in a daze. And she continues to be in a daze throughout the entire movie. And this video is going to go on and on if I talk too much about it, but I very enthusiastically recommend this film. Okay, so now getting to one of the main events today, and this is a quick review discussion of Clown in a Cornfield by Adam Caesar. I bought this book when it came out, and it sat on my shelf, and I love looking at the cover, but I just never picked it up, and it's a shame that I didn't read it sooner, but better late than never. So I read this last week as part of a buddy read with Lydia over at Typical Books. She's already posted her video. She did a really nice, involved review about it. I'm going to link her video below so you can check that out. So yeah, this book came out through Harper Teen last year. It won the Bram Stoker Award for Best Young Adult Horror, I think. And congratulations to Adam Caesar. He is a horror tuber. I've watched his channel for years, and I'm very proud that a member of our community landed this book deal, and I think they're making it into a movie and the Stoker Award, so kudos to him. So I finally read this, and it is a young adult book, but it's definitely graphic. It's not like the Cirque du Freak This is very bloody. It's a slasher story, basically. So there's a lot of knives, there are arrows, there are guns, there are fires, and people being, gross out scenes. There was one scene in a corn crib where a character wakes up in a corn crib, and it's disgusting, like a silo kind of thing. Or maybe it was a corn crib. I don't know, there's a silo too, but that scared me, especially when he realizes there's another body in there with him. That was a really scary part of the book. I think that's probably the only scare I got, but it was still very entertaining. So it's about this young girl, a high school teenager. It is about teens, okay, so we're in that world. She moves to a small town from Philadelphia. I know Adam Caesar lives in Philadelphia. I should give him a call sometime. Maybe he can hang out in the library. There were some Philadelphia-isms thrown in, but I think I related more to the rural elements in the story because I grew up outside of Philadelphia, but definitely in the country on a farm. I spent a lot of time as a kid playing manhunt in cornfields because my cousins lived on a really big, like, functional farm. We had a farm, but we didn't have, we had animals, but we weren't like a functioning farm, although we did have a nice garden. But this was like, they made money from corn on this farm. So there were acres and acres and acres of cornfields. And there's something very scary about a cornfield. So I was intrigued by that. Also, like the description of the barn, having parties out there. Like when we got older as teens, we would have parties at somebody always had a huge piece of property, and there would be drinking out in the clearings and partying in the barn and kids sneaking off to the hayloft to, do whatever. And it kind of was like a nice nostalgia for me for that part of my life. It's amazing that we never died as kids the way we playing manhunt in the cornfield, that none of us ever got like super lost. And when you were caught, you were brought back to the barn, kicking and screaming, like really playing the roles. And where our parents were, I don't know. We were just, in the summertime especially, we were on our own, and it was wonderful. But we would be brought back to the barn and locked in a cow cage. I remember that. And one of the cow cages had like a trap door. I remember once, probably when I was like 9 years old, crawling up there, going through the trap door, and underneath like this big piece of farm equipment, a huge tractor or something, a thresher, having to like crawl on my belly, underneath to escape. So a lot of fond memories growing up. And this definitely brought me back to that. It doesn't really start slow, but it starts, with the friends and the cliques and the bitchy girl and the girl trying to fit in and kind of getting a crush on the boy. It did have like your typical movie, like teen movie horror tropes. Right off the bat, I'll just say that, this book fits right in with Fear Street and Stranger Things, like that kind of vibe. But once the killing takes place, where these the clowns, I gave it away. There is a clown, but there are more than one clown. Killer clowns, I guess you could say. There's like a massacre, and that part stretches for probably half the book at least. And I really enjoyed that. Toward the end, like when some of the motives and plot twists were revealed, a bit preposterous, I have to say. And I said that to Lydia. I'm not really buying all of this stuff, but I'm going with it because it's fun and it's entertaining. I gave this book 4 stars. It was an entertaining read. All of this, reading all these books and this movie about carnival horror and clown horror reminded me of every summer around this time, because it would happen in August, there would be the Midway Fire Company Carnival. And that was probably the most exciting thing that happened all summer. And when you're a kid, summer stretches forever. So by the time it got to August, it felt like we had already lived 10 years. But all that time, we were gathering up as much money as we could, so then we would go to the carnival. And there was always that scary, fun aspect to the carnival. And I'm trying to capture that feeling in my novel. But I was meditating on that and thinking, like, what was that? I remember there was always that one story, and of course these were like urban myths, but the one kid who stuck his arm in the machinery and got, lost his arm, or the creepy carny, You know, my mother's always like, when we got older, she's like, you don't want to ever date those carnival guys. She was probably right. So yeah, so the carnival always kind of had that appeal. There was square dancing. When you spin the wheel, you know, now you win a stuffed animal, then it was like a side of bacon or a piece of ham or something. So I do fondly remember the old carnival, and the rides were always kind of scary, especially these temporary rides because they're put together by stoned carny guys, and God knows if the Ferris wheel's going to go flying off into the night, there was always that danger. A carnival is just a great setting for horror, whether it's the scary fun house or the Hall of Mirrors or the Tunnel of Love. All kinds of things could happen. Yeah, so this is kind of my foray into carnival horror. And I hope you'll check out my blog. I hope you'll check out some of these recommendations. Let me know in the comments below if you've read any of these works discussed today, or if you've seen Carnival of Souls. I would love to hear your thoughts. I didn't wear a clown costume. I don't really have a clown costume, although Batilda has been known to play the fool. But anyway, that's all I have for today. Thanks for stopping by my haunted library, and I'll see you soon. Bye!